what we're talking about today is organization dynamics. And what that references are those barriers and successes that support that shift in culture. If you have taken that course 4, we've talked a lot about that culture shift that's required when we go into technology first. And sometimes that brings with it, as you know, change. And change and transformation can create a lot of different feelings within staff and families and community partners. So after working with the state of Tennessee for 3 years on their transformation project, we decided to spend time in year 2, actually, and then again in year 3, looking at what are some of those barriers, and then how do we proactively address those barriers in order either to reduce kind of the impact they have, or to maybe even eliminate them altogether. So we want to share some of that information with you guys today. And as we go, we are more than happy for you to step up and say, you know what, we've had that same challenge, or, you know, we've had this struggle. How are you guys working through it? Because that's what we want this opportunity to be for you guys. Before we jump into the discussion, though, I want to share with you 2 different scenarios that demonstrate some of the barriers we can experience as we make this change, as we move into Tech First. The first story is about a woman who wanted to live on her own, self-advocated. This was almost 10 years ago when we first started with technology on a national level. And she wanted to live in an apartment in a very small community. And a staff person would be living in an apartment 2 doors away, so not far. And it was the first assessment that I did for Simply Home. I actually went on site to the meeting, and there were 20 people there, which to me was a barrier to begin with. That's a barrier for communication at times. It can be overwhelming for the self-advocate and or family. It may not allow for a lot of authentic communication because there are so many voices. But I walked in and we sat down, and for most of the meeting, people were talking around her, not with her, not asking her questions, but really talking about her and around her. And finally, after her brother, who was very adamant that she was not going to live on her own, after he piped in, she said, she looked right at him and she said, I want to live by myself and I want to cook. Well, that just pushed him to the next level of fear and anxiety, understandably, because for him it was going to be a safety issue. Would she burn the apartment down? Would she hurt herself? So we talked about using a stove sensor and being able to alert the staff, who could be literally right down the way in just 2 minutes time. So when we decided to support the brother. This was a success. I will say this for this team. This was a success. The brother was willing to take this on if we would come back together in 3 months and talk about how the technology was doing. And that's a great way to do this, right? Instead of waiting a whole year, take the opportunity to get together, connect, see how things are going. So I pulled the data from the technology, came to the meeting, and his first piece of feedback was, she can't do this. She had too many alerts from her stove during this time. I pulled out the report, and the person facilitating the meeting said, Simply Home, can you share with us the data? And I did, and the data was that she'd only had 1 alert in 3 months' time, and the staff had addressed that alert with her. And so what could have been a challenge, which is people's assumptions and fears kind of overriding the process, really became a success by using the data and the technology and true observation to make those decisions. So she still is living on her own very well and cooking all the time, I understand. So that's one situation. Another scenario I want to share with you actually came about by an organization who really was trying to do right by an individual. They have a heart of gold. They have been leaders and innovators in their state as far as community supported living long before it was mandated. Really good people, really get the the values around community supported living. So I did an assessment with them, and it was for a gentleman who lives he's in a wheelchair and lives in an apartment complex that's inclusive. They had several individuals living in this apartment complex, and they have a staff hub apartment. So they called us and they said, something's wrong with the chair pad you gave us. It makes him slip out of his wheelchair. So we'd never had that problem before. So one of our team members called and talked to the gentleman, not just the staff, but the gentleman. And it turned out he didn't want technology. No one had bothered to even ask him. They just thought he would make a great candidate because he was so independent in other ways. So what he was doing was throwing himself out of his chair, slipping out of his chair on purpose to get the attention of the staff. And they would come down and put him back in his chair, and he'd wait till they'd leave, and then he would do the same. And that was the way he was communicating to them, I don't want this in my life. And so even though they had the best of intentions, they forgot a critical piece there, which created a huge barrier, not only for them, but for this gentleman as well. And that was being person-centered. So I'd like to open it up now, and remember you've got mute on. Do any of you have any successes or barriers or challenges that you've experienced that you'd like to share with the group or put out there for discussion?
This is Julie,
Hey, Julie.
from Kreider, and we have some staff that are older and not as technology savvy. So we have both a challenge with it and a positive. So one of them is very resistant to the whole thing, very negative, but taking the classes. The other one was very resistive, taking the classes and saying, it's going to take me a while to learn it, but I'm going to do it. And so it's very, we're seeing that, and the more the education components have gone through, the more comfortable he's going. We also had to implement an on-call system, and because all of the staff in that program support what we're doing so much, the on-call was not an issue, and they were ready to get going with it. So that was pretty exciting. We weren't sure what kind of pushback we'd have on that, but how to help the older staff feel a little more comfortable with the having to check the equipment and that kind of thing is probably the big challenge we have right now.
Okay, sure. And we've heard that on multiple occasions. I saw Milton nodding his head. Milton, do you have any feedback on that one that you'd like to share?
Yes, we've actually run into this quite often, and I really liked how you said, one of the things that you're doing to address this is that training. We usually found that a little bit of training goes a long way with them becoming more comfortable with the technology and their role in what that technology would look like. Another thing that we've been using, especially with older, staff that are kind of resistant, is that we have our own model home in which we can bring the individual there and actually interact with the actual devices. And with the staff members there, they can actually see how the individual will be using the devices and interacting with the devices to show that safety and security. And a lot of times, seeing the individual actually being able to use the device, interact with the device, their excitement with saying that they can do it, with telling staff this is what they want in their home to be able to use it. That a lot of times changes the staff mind to say, okay, it sounds like you really want this, then I'm going to support you in having this device in the home or this technology solution in the home. So I know that some of our provider agencies have made what they called mini apartments in their agency, where they just took one room in their agency and put some technology in there so that individuals can come and interact with it, and staff can interact with it, and they can get feedback from the staff and individuals of whether or not they think this would be a good fit. So, that could be an option. I know Simply Home has helped some of our provider agencies, get some of that technology and install it. So that's always an option. And then finally, we've always had issues with conservators that kind of push back from guardians and parents saying, they won't be able to use it. This is not going to be good for them. And one time I asked a conservator, like, what was said to you one time that made you change your mind for your son or daughter to be able to use this technology? And they basically said that, one person asked me, what are you going to do when you're no longer able to support your own son or daughter? Mm-hmm. And so just with that question, the provider, the guardian was able to then say, you're right. I think we need to start looking at ways in which my son or daughter is able to support themselves, is to be able to become more independent, because I know they can do it, and it's just me holding them back. So,
yeah. And one thing I've seen some other people do is, instead of, especially when you have that guardian that's somewhat hesitant, or even a staff person that's somewhat hesitant, is to, you don't have to go flip the switch and pull staff out. You can slowly, as we talked about in the course, slowly work it in where, you can kind of test it out.
Yeah, and even, Julie, one thing we've seen happen too is, instead of having that staff maybe be supporting somebody who has a huge technology system or a lot of environmental controls, maybe they're just supporting somebody who has a medication dispenser. So it's something that's easy to understand and work with initially while they develop their comfort level, because you're right, self-advocates and family members are not going to be the only ones concerned about this. Staff will be too. And we have to apply a person-centered approach to our staff, just like we do with the self-advocates and the families. And sometimes that means doing a stepped process with a staff person, just like we would do with an individual. So thank you for that question. And actually, what I'm going to do then, because that really helps me jump into another opportunity to share with you, I'm going to share my screen. When we worked with the state of Tennessee, I actually had some questionnaires in year 2 and divided the whole group into 4 teams, and they responded to these questions. And I want to show you some of the activities that they put together on their own, not during our mentor sessions. They came up with these in order to support staff, but as it started working so well, they branched out on these opportunities into inviting community partners and families. So first of all, here were some of the concerns that were raised by staff. Again, always going back to that, the technology is going to replace me. They want to know where the proof is of technology working. I think one of the biggest fears, and Dustin talked about this a little bit yesterday, is that idea that they're scared that they're going to be held accountable if something happens, because they're the DSP and they're the ones who are on the front lines. And if something doesn't work, it's going to come back to them. And that's a heavy burden to bear. So some of the other challenges that have been raised, integrating technology adds more responsibilities to my day. And again, that's an education issue, helping them appreciate that there are trade-offs. It's not that it's going to add more, but that other opportunities are reduced, and so that you can only have to focus on supports when needed as opposed to 24/7. Not understanding technology, not a part of my original job description. And so understanding that as an organization, especially in your organization tech plan, you may be looking at how do we redefine those reallocated roles, and how do we update with our staff what those new roles and responsibilities look like. And then going down, here's some other ones, and if you're on the phone and you can't see them, I'll just mention a few. They're jaded by the conservator or family. Some staff, as we know, staff and families talk a lot, and they can make an impact on each other's opinions. The time and the resources, who's going to be responsible for training all these people. fear of being watched or monitored by the administration or their supervisor. And then thinking about that context of the individual will never be able to use or do this. And again, that's going to be an attitudinal culture shift that's bigger than watching a course online. So here are some examples, and I can talk you through some of these, or Milton, if you want to chime in. Some of the things that these groups tried were really exciting to hear about, and wanted to capture these and share them with you because they have worked very effectively. In particular, one group in Tennessee did what they called an Appy Hour open house. So they talked about something as simple as apps, and people are familiar with those. People have technology where they use apps in the day-to-day. So it's easy to start thinking about making that transition to using apps with individuals that we support. But then broadening that into an open house where if you don't have a demo site, or a demo apartment, have an open house and bring people in and show video stories that we've shared with you. Have some of the technology available. I know Simply Home, we will send you a demo box that has technology that no longer works, but you can still show people what it looks like and they can get their hands on it. Have community partners or other people who've already been using the technology, or other self-advocates or families who can be available at that open house to chat. Two other ways people were reaching out was on a regular basis creating tech tips. So a Tech Tip Tuesday, or they were sending out newsletters with a weekly tech tip in it. Making sure that they were including people beyond staff, that it really became, again, a part of their culture and a part of their programming, not just a part of staff development. So those are some of the pieces experienced in Tennessee. Do any of you guys have any suggestions about ways that you are educating on helping people be familiar with technology? Or Dustin, have you got any suggestions?
Wait to see if anybody else does. I've got a couple of comments.
Sure.
One quick follow-up, Cameron, with those open houses that that some of our provider agencies had. To get people there, they actually had drawings for door prizes.
Yeah.
And it could have been like a Amazon little Echo Dot, or something small that doesn't cost very much, but in a way, when a staff member won those, it forced them to learn how to use it, and then then they started using it, and then they started becoming an ambassador to other people, saying, "Hey, this is really cool. Maybe we should look at other people using it." So, there's a lot of different creative ways to get people interested in starting to look at technology, and you don't have to use big technology, just something small that just to get them started.
Definitely.
And this might be a little too philosophical of a comment, but we all use technology in our lives every day. I mean, it's such a huge part. We couldn't even work right now if we didn't have it. And it's almost one argument you can make with the teams, if an individual is interested in this, is almost a human rights issue. Like, they have the right to use the technology that they can. Another comment is, I also threw in there, if the demo room thing worked really well in the state of Ohio when they first started their Tech First push. It was all done from the state level down, and they would hold an event in one part of the state, and they would put stuff in the newsletter, and it was really slow to get started. And then they realized that what they needed to do was to get some kind of local examples, and so that people could experience technology within their bubble of influence. So they did give some money to kind of some of the local county boards, which are the local governmental oversight entities, where they could go out and set up these demo rooms and then do open houses. And those really worked for people to come in and put their hands on it, see that it's not scary, and, I don't have to actually do anything with this. I just talk to it. I mean, so that worked really well. But obviously that's an expensive proposition for every agency to go out and buy. If you really want to put a good demo room together, it's probably going to be $5,000 to $7,000. You could probably do it less, but that being said, there are many, many lending libraries around the country, and a great way to find those is to go to your state AT Act program. And I did throw a link there in the chat so that you could see and get and find your local state AT Act program. They have to do device lending. They don't have to lend you a bunch of devices, though. Typically what those folks are doing is lending one device out to an individual to kind of try before that individual goes and buys something. But I'm guaranteeing you that these folks will work with you. The other one just completely escaped my mind. As soon as I turned 40, that happens like twice a week now. Oh, cultural change, and that local bubble of influence.
Yeah.
I think that we've talked about it in the courses, and Cameron may have mentioned it, but sharing local stories. So even if you've got that one person that uses an Alexa to play music while she's cleaning her house, whatever it is, start to share those stories. You all are going to be the local tech champs, right? You're the ETIS within your organizations or your regions. Sorry, Alexa, stop. So share those stories with people. And if you can't find any within your organization because it's so new to your organization, maybe start interacting with some of the other people in the other organizations around you. And you may find somebody that has those stories, and create an informal group between your organization experts and those other organizations experts. And then, I think there's a synergy that can happen as organizations start to collaborate. As a former tech, I ran a tech company called Rest Assured before Disability Cocoon, and we were very collaborative amongst each other. And I know that is a thing in our industry. So, and reach out to your state trade association. If your agency is a member of the Provider Trade Association, reach out to them to see if they can facilitate pulling together that group of people, just so you can start to get those stories, because people have to see this stuff, put their hands on it in their local area and within, their peer group.
Yeah. And, to follow up with that, I know we're in a time of COVID and whatnot. So finding online resources is a part of the courses. You may have gone to the Simply Home website, where we have a virtual tour through an apartment on there that points out all the technology. Things like that you can even find through some of the vendors that you work with. It can be helpful for families to just have that opportunity to get to know what's available and develop that awareness. We had somebody in the webinar yesterday say one of the biggest barriers is the fact that people just aren't aware of what's available or how it can support someone with disabilities. I may have a cell phone and use apps, but that doesn't necessarily mean I have the awareness of how this could be customized or even used off the shelf to support my sister or my child with disabilities. So developing that opportunity for awareness just by encouraging folks to go to websites can be helpful as well. And then finally, thinking about what shift is in the future. And one of our hopes is that as we open up these discussion threads, as we continue to have topic-oriented webinars, that you will connect with each other, and that you'll use webinars yourselves, maybe to introduce families to families or staff to staff, and make those connections beyond just your local or regional area, because there are so many of you out there who have that same level of desire and momentum going on, and yet you may not be in a place where you can, proximity-wise, be close to each other. But technology affords us the capacity to be that way anyway. So I will encourage you to be a part of that connection with folks here. Any other feedback? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and open it up to them. I was going to say something.
Yeah, any other feedback about staff successes or barriers around other people on the team and concerns?
So this is Colleen from Wisconsin, and I think one of the things that we run into sometimes is the more people learn, they want to use it all, and trying to strike that balance between what makes sense and what is that person most comfortable with. And we have some agencies like our Adult Protective Services that says, yeah, if you can put alarms on the doors and windows and everywhere, that would be great. And yet not necessary. Like that, it doesn't fit within that person's outcomes or what they really want their life to look like. But yet people learn about it and think, yeah, but what if something happens? It's going to alert us, when again, it's not necessary. It just doesn't seem to fit within that what that person wants to see their life look like. So I would say that's a piece that we are really trying to stay focused on. This is really about that individual and how to best support them based on, you know, what makes sense, but really trying to help people understand that's the starting point, and that's what we need to keep at the forefront. Simply because we can do it doesn't mean we should. So really, I think that's probably some of the conversations we found ourselves in, and trying to help people to grasp that, I think, has been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and I think, Colleen, in terms of being the one person, one of our team of assessors several years ago, I learned to ask the good questions, you know, because we'd have, especially, you know, family members who wanted that sensor on every door, every window, gate sensors, you know, like, and my question would be, you know, help me understand, are there behavior concerns that you're trying to address, or what are the outcomes here? And really bringing them back to either the current service plan or the plan that we were working on for technology, because you're right, it does get to a point where it can be too much, and then it becomes restrictive again. It's not, you know, I was working with an organization, they literally, because the woman who was going to be living in the home, because she had been sexually active as a person with IDD, they wanted to put a sensor on every external opening of the house, whether it was a window, a garage door, or a door. And my question to them was, then how is that any different than her being with 24/7 staff sitting with her, keeping her from going outside? Oh, well, that's a human rights issue. Well, why is this not a human rights issue? You know, so helping them appreciate that while technology is a natural support, it still can be used in ways that is not a support, you know. So it's finding those good, asking the good questions. That's what I call it. Yeah.
I like that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, gladly.
And
Any other feedback?
Colleen, just to add on to that, just like Cameron was saying, when developing our enabling technology program in the state of Tennessee, we came out and pretty much said that any technology solution that we feel would require a human rights restriction, you know, or approval from a human rights committee is not going to be part of our program. And so basically we said that all of our technology solutions are going to be, you know, person-centered. They're going to be agreed upon by the person and the circle support team, and it won't violate any rights when it comes to their restrictions, because the person will be on board with having those technologies in place for the supports that they're wanting and looking for. So yeah, so none of our technology solutions have to go through human rights committees, because they are put together by the person and their circle of support, and it meets the needs of that person supported.
And I'm going to comment on that and then tie it into another issue, Cameron, and stop me if you're not ready to go to the funding thing yet.
It's up. No, just go on.
But I mean, if a state requires that a human rights committee review some of this stuff, it's because the state just didn't look at it the right way. Or the people that were in charge at that time, the regulation is a little unnecessary. And there are several barriers like that in regulations as an example. So I want to encourage you all as the local tech champions, with a network of other people and Disability Cocoon and Simply Home and all the other vendors that we can help, like, let's work together to approach your state to get those regulations changed, because it's possible. I did that in my previous role at Rest Assured all the time. It takes a long time, but we can get these regulations changed to create more opportunities for the people that you're serving to take advantage of this, and to remove some of those regulatory red tape stuff that just doesn't make sense anymore. So I would encourage you to do that. And also on the same line, you know, I know a lot of it, you know, funding is a big barrier, obviously, right? So in some states, there's great funding that's extremely flexible, allows for the use of basically any type of device that the team approves. In other states, they have funding for technology, but it's very prescriptive. Hey, we'll fund remote supports that are defined this way, or we'll find assistive technology if this, this, and this, which, you know, we do have to have some control and some regulations over what we're doing. I'm not insinuating we shouldn't, but if you don't have the funding that you need, advocate for that. Form a group, again, working with local, your peer organizations, working through the trade association, inviting your advocacy groups within your state to participate in it, and asking your state to participate and set up a work group. Maybe your state would be willing to facilitate that. And that's something that Disability Cocoon is helping many states with right now. So if you'd like to do that, I'm happy to help in any way. So I guess I'm just trying to get you confident and motivated to go out and you can make those changes. It's not going to be quick, but you can make those changes in your state. I'm sure most of you know that.
So one thing I'm adding over in the chat box is that during the beginning of COVID, we were contacted by a couple of states about how to adapt language in the Medicaid waivers to be more open-ended and include more capacity for technology. We've developed a guide on how to talk to your states about Medicaid waiver language changes and being more inclusive. So I'm noting that here, and I'm going to put my email by that. If you'd like a copy of that guide, let me know and I will get it to you. I can also slip it into the platform as a part of the Course 4 learning plan. You know how at the end of the learning plan there are a whole bunch of resources. I'll just slip it in there as well, so you'll have that as a resource.
I'll go ahead and throw your email address in there for you, Cameron.
Okay. So we've talked about staff and we've talked about successes and challenges related to staffing. Are there any, and then we've started kind of the conversations about the funding piece. In part of in course 5 for sure, and it's referenced some in course 4, talking about different models of sustainability and different ways to access waivers and use that funding to support what you're doing. We know that right now there are a lot of challenges for some states about having that funding come down from Medicaid utilization review committees into the MCOs or directly down to the individuals and the families. And so oftentimes we encourage folks to talk to vendors, talk to other organizations, see if there are grant opportunities or if organizations want to do pilot projects. We're working with some of you right now who have had some grants written and working toward trying out enabling technology that way so you can create a proof of concept for your state. And that's critical sometimes. So looking at, I want to talk a little bit about thinking about practices that have enhanced this tech integration and the shift in culture for organizations. Two pieces that have stood out in feedback that we have gotten for several years now have been that education and communication are the two key aspects that impact culture shift and that really are critical in this move into technology first so that transformation takes place. Education has often been a barrier when people hold off and use it after installation of the products, because by that point, people are either frustrated or concerned or not really sure what they should be doing with the technology. So what's the point of me taking these classes now? And that's when we see technology get pushed to the side. The communication piece is critical not only in-house, but also externally, so that people around you, community partners, families, other organizations, can become your circle of support. When they understand what you're doing, when the state understands what you're doing, they can be your cheerleaders. They can be those people that can help you in this process. You know, employers, landlords, they need to understand these pieces too, and transparency and communication will help that. Dustin, you or Milton, do you guys have any other feedback about communication or education?
Well, I don't have any quite feedback about communication or education. I believe you covered it all, but there's a couple of other points I know in our state that provider agencies have really stressed that agencies need to have these best practices in place in order for it to be successful. One is person-centered thinking. If your organization is not a person-centered organization in which you do person-centered practices and you've developed a culture for person-centered thinking practices, then we've seen organizations that didn't use the technology in the right way. Kind of those examples that Cameron gave, where they just tried to throw technology into an environment and it wasn't successful because the person didn't want it. They didn't put the correct technology in there. They didn't have the buy-in from the person actually going to use it. So everything needs to be person-centered. You have to use person-centered thinking techniques in planning in order for a lot of these plans and these devices to be really successful. So as an organization, I would recommend that if you haven't adopted person-centered thinking and planning, that's something that you do before even considering putting together technology solutions. And then secondly is that you have to have a good enabling technology team in place at your organization. And it has to consist of leadership from the organization buying into this cultural shift to use technology first initiatives. And if there's not a buy-in from your leaders in that provider organization, then your momentum is going to stall really, really quickly. You're going to have a really, you're going to start out thinking that this is a great idea, but if you don't have that leadership push, it's going to get halfway through and then it's just going to stop. So you really need a good team that consists of upper leadership, that also consists of staff members that are interested in this, coordinators that are buying it into the whole idea of technology first, and even people supported that are interested in using the technology because they can provide good feedback on how these technology solutions can help them and the people that they interact with every day, their friends. So those are the two things that I would recommend is person-centered and a good enabling technology team in place.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that, my comment was going to be related to it. You absolutely, Milton is right. You got to have the leadership on board, right? And I don't know how to say this, but we do run businesses, right? We have to be fiscally responsible. So your leadership is going to want to see and understand the business model behind tech very well. So if that's something that you don't understand, we're happy to help you with that in your state to kind of look at it and evaluate it and those kinds of things. But they work with your leadership to make sure that they understand the business model behind it and the impact to your organization as well. Obviously, first and foremost, as Milton said, we have to be person-centered, but we also have to be fiscally responsible and making sure that we're understanding those aspects so that we can get leadership buy-in. Because as Milton said, once you do, there's going to be a push for that if they can see the ROI on the person side as well as the financial side. Yeah.
And if you're here today as part of your leadership team, then I want to say I applaud you. I have worked with enough organizations whose leadership has felt like they didn't need the education, they didn't want the education, that was only for direct support staff. They knew everything, or we actually just had an organization tell us they didn't need the education for their direct support team because they knew it all and their direct support staff was just going to do what they told them to do. I say all that to you because having the leadership be a part of this program and this accreditation, we were very intentional about that because you are setting the tone, and what you do is modeling for your staff that this is a fully inclusive approach. It's not just about one layer of your organization being educated or being a part of hands-on learning. It's about everyone coming to the same place and truly creating that transformation with buy-in, with the culture shift, with the knowledge, all of those pieces that will make this a successful process for you. So thank you. If you are mid-management, supervisors, leadership team people, what you are doing by being a part of this is not lost on your staff or your families. It's critical. Any other feedback about those pieces or questions or concerns?
I've got an idea. So you want to put together a demo room, or you want to, I don't really know how to say what I'm thinking. There's obviously going to be a cost associated with the learning curve, with getting technology to do these demo rooms and all of that kind of stuff. And we were talking about the business model behind this thing. So be creative in your thinking, and maybe you can set up another business line within your organization that you can monetize creatively. Set up a demo room and charge $10 admission for your peers to come and play and experience, serve snacks, little mini conferences. There's maybe ways you can creatively monetize these things so that it's not just an expense for your organization to do these things. There's revenue coming in to support your efforts. So be creative in putting those kinds of things together, because that will knock down some of the barriers, the financial barriers maybe.
And as far as video stories are concerned, it does not take a lot of high-tech equipment to do that these days. I mean, just having somebody FaceTime a 2-minute story about their experience, especially staff people to staff people, it can make a huge impact. So, the stories that we did and that we included here, we use a little bit of professional equipment and editing, right? But in the day-to-day, there have been times where I literally have called Becky and asked her to do a FaceTime with a family if she's interested. And she has stood right up and been glad to do that. I've asked staff to do that with each other before as well. Those stories, numbers and stats are important, but it's those stories that really can create the opportunity to think outside the box in ways that maybe people haven't done before. So I don't want to negate the value of story. It's very important in this process. Any other suggestions or highlights that you want to share? Or we can even open it up to, because this is our last webinar and we're down to about 10 minutes. Any other feedback, questions, concerns about the shift in general and how things are going?
Besides the webinars.
Right. I will remind you this though while you're thinking. So after you finish your exam, there will be another course that is for the opportunity for you to upload your paperwork. If you are an organization submitting an org tech plan, the leadership person will submit that tech plan via their learning plan in that course. If you are an ETIS and you are working with your team on an organization tech plan, please feel free to upload that with your paperwork if you want. You are required to complete the screening matrix, the intake form, and the technology integration plan form for an individual. I want to remind you, I'm going to share my screen. Want to remind you that if you have any questions or concerns about what you need to be doing next, go to your techfirstshift.org website. Scroll down, here are your requirements, here are the timelines. I'll tell you that the exam is already open, so you're more than welcome to go ahead and start it if you're ready. It will close for you guys on August 7th. August 14th is the final due date for your Enabling Tech Integration Project and your organization tech plan. All that needs to be submitted by August 14th. If you have any questions about what we're going to be looking at, here are your rubrics so you can get a feel for how we'll be evaluating those documents. And then when you guys come up with questions, I do add them to the FAQs at the bottom of the page, so you can always check back there. And that's all I have. Dustin, have you got anything you'd like to share before we close out?
Yes, one last thing. Julie, I loved your comment about are people willing to share their contact information? And while we were doing this webinar, I was chatting with who hosts the learning management platform, and there's not a way for users to see each other's contact information, unfortunately, in the platform. But what they suggested that we do is create a dedicated page where people can share their contact information through like a chat or a forum. And so I will create something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like yet, but I'll try to create a place where people can share their contact information, just so that if somebody's looking for a peer that's in the same state or the same whatever, maybe people can start to share there. And also in each in each course at the bottom, there's a discussion forum, and you just have to click on that and it'll open up a discussion. So if you want to make comments about a specific course and ask to, if somebody else has any comments on that, you can do that as well. So right down below where you watch the videos and, review the content, the very bottom of that page, there's a discussion forum and a file repository. And the discussion forum is where you could do that.
So we've got a question from Sunny. Sunny, be glad to hear what you got for us.
Great, thank you. I actually have two questions. So my first question is regarding the submission of the ETIP, and I'm wondering, the forms have identifying information for our members on there, and I'm wondering about excluding that on the submission, if that would be acceptable.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with in terms of, we don't need to know the name of the person or any demographics. We just want to see how you've completed the form, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is regarding the exam, if I might. I'm just wondering if you can give us a sense of how many questions or the length of time we should be setting aside to allow for that exam. Do you have a sense of that?
Sure. So the exam is for the ETIS is about 40 questions, I believe. And the exam questions are similar to the types of questions that you had at the end of each course. So pretty short. There are no long narrative response answers. There's no essays, anything like that. So gauging how you did the end of the course test, you'll be doing the same type of thing with the exam. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, gladly.
Cameron, do you know, can you start and stop the exam, or do you have to try to do all 40 questions all at once, and then if you don't pass, then retake it?
I believe that I set it up so that you could come back to it, because I figured people have a life outside of the platform. So, but when we get off of the webinar, I will go back and make sure, because that's just a click of a button and I can change that if I need to.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, gladly. And there is no time limit set on the exam. I know I did that as well. Like, it could take you 10 hours to finish it, and that would be fine. It's not going to cut you off. Someone did ask if you could retake the exam, and yes, you can. I believe that there's a cap on it, that maybe you can only retake it 3 times. You can retake it. Any other questions today? And please know that you can always reach out to Dustin as administrator of Shift. And if you have any curriculum or content questions, you can reach out to me. And we are available as we can be to support you guys as you finish the pilot. So while we have this group of you face-to-face, we both just want to say thank you so much for the time, the energy, the positive feedback, the constructive feedback, all the ways that you've helped us in this pilot. It is really bringing together this opportunity to create a standardized approach to best practices for Tech First. And as we are starting to actually frame out what this accreditation program is going to look like, your feedback and your time and attention that you've given this have helped us tremendously. So we want to tell you that in person today, that you've been a great help, and we're so glad and so appreciative for your being here. So thank you.
Absolutely. I can't say it any better. I feel the exact same way.
So you guys take care of yourselves, keep cool, be safe, let us know what we can do to support you, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to everybody.
Have a good one.